Hello and welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of Conversations with Vijeet, wherein I talk with batchmates of mine who pursued MBA in Sports Management from Deakin University, Melbourne in the years 2015 to 18. For this episode, I have Akshay Basrur as my guest who is joining me from Mumbai. Hi Akshay, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Vijeet. Thank you very much for having me. I'm doing very well. Hope all is well at your end too.
Same here, Akshay. So, all set, Akshay, shall we begin with the questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Akshay, first up, why did you choose to do sports management and that too at Deakin? And you can also put some light on what you were doing before it.
Sure. So I pretty much got out of college and found myself to be working in this place called Procam International. Procam is a pretty big company in Mumbai in India, and they do the Tata Marathon, the Bangalore
Yeah.
10K, the Delhi 21K, so on and so forth. So it working at Procam gave me a flavor of what it would be like to be working in sport. And what I enjoyed very much was also the fact that you kind of get your hands dirty to a certain extent. There's a bit of ops. It's not a regular day job. You
Yeah.
don't sit at a desk all the time. And I did see myself doing that in life in general. So that sort of prompted me to then, in about 2 years from there, I figured that, I mean, if I've got to study any further, now is probably the right time. And Deakin markets itself in India very well.
Yeah. Right.
So I came across Deakin, did a little bit of research. Also, the fact that it was in Melbourne, which is also the sport capital of the world, was also appealing. And I decided to take the plunge.
Right. And how was your visa process and the application process? Did you consult any agency?
Yes, I think I went through Advice, which is based in Bombay,
Okay.
and it was pretty easy peasy. I don't think there was a lot of trouble there. It was essentially doing APTE, and then everything else was just pretty standard. I found it to
Okay.
be quite comfortable.
Right. All right. And like when you landed up in Melbourne, like you can, like, how was your experience doing the course? Yeah, or
When I
the
landed
entire
in
2 years.
Melbourne, sure. So I think overall it was really fun, but what really piqued my interest was certain sort of modules and units, such as PR, as an example, or such as sport marketing, and more of those sort of modules that were application based. And that's, I think, a very big difference as compared to what I did here previously in India in terms of studying what all of us do
Yeah.
usually.
Hmm.
Um, the sort of assignments that you had to do and the sort of applications that you had to sort of demonstrate to prove that you have truly understood the subject was a lot more practical as compared to what people usually do in India. So I
Hmm.
really liked that side of things a lot more. The fact that you would actually interact with experts from the field, like athlete managers and people who manage brands and so on and so forth, and your professors walking in with like sneakers. It was quite cool. And I think as compared to enjoying it overall, I also enjoyed those aspects a lot more, where you could actually kind of get a flavor of what really happens in the real world. I also think
Yeah.
that my experience in ProCam also helped me to sort of join the dots as compared to kind of going in fresh and having to imagine a lot of things. It gave me a bit of context.
Right. Yeah. And so you would say that that course met your expectations?
Yeah, the cost did meet my expectations, surely. But I do feel what really supplemented that very well is the experience that I had outside of doing the course. So, as an example, when I was working for Event Workforce, or as an example, when I was working for a local city council,
Hmm.
those small but very sort of ground level up experiences really helped me to get a better understanding of how it would actually unfold. And again, this was in another country altogether. So, a very different experience as compared to what I had in India. So,
Right.
I think it is a combination of having the opportunity to work there part time, which also added its own flavor to it. And for me specifically, helped me understand what is it that I really want to do. Is it operations? Okay, yes, maybe not all that much. Is it
Hmm.
marketing? What does that entail? So on and so forth. So I think that particular aspect of the course or that period of 2 years also allowed me to do a lot of trial and error. That okay,
Yeah.
this is operations. Okay, I've done operations. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Okay, this is marketing a little bit. Am I
Hmm.
liking it? Is this what I see myself doing in future? And I think that eventually kind of settled down and helping me realize which particular stream and sport do I want to get into.
Hmm. Yeah. And where did you work part-time? You must have volunteered at a lot of events, I guess, during the course.
Towards the start of it, yes, but I think the big break for me, as for most in our batch, I felt was event workforce,
Yeah,
because
right.
working for them, yeah, and I would do it week in, week out, and working for them really gave me the opportunity to work across multiple sports as well and
Hmm.
events in general, because it's not a purely sport sort of event-based company. I mean, they provide resources for all sorts of events. So it was a lot of exposure. It was a lot of new environments and new people to work with and new systems, and everybody had their own sort of induction as well, if you know what I mean. So you'd always go in with a sense of not knowing what to expect, which also sort of had its own kind of fun and excitement to the whole thing.
Right. And I guess you finished your course in July 2017, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So post that, were you still working part-time, which you were doing at that time, like before during the course, or did you find a full-time job immediately afterwards?
I think I was working I was working part-time, and I was working for contract sort of roles for a good year after the course as well. So
Okay.
I think I was fortunate because during my time at Deakin for about 2 years or so, places like Event Workforce, a local city council, and then also the state sport trust in Melbourne, like
Hmm.
for example, the Melbourne Sport and Aquatic Centre, Lakeside Stadium, so on and so forth. So that working there really helped me with a lot of confidence and also a bit of background. And within a year after uni ended is when I landed my first job, but that was in Sydney. But I
Okay.
feel that across that 1 year, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to work for the Commonwealth Games, have the
Right.
opportunity to work for the Cat 11's Great Ocean Road Race,
Yeah.
Melbourne Run for the Kids, and at pretty decent positions as well as a signage manager, as a cost sort of a branding operator, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So I think it all kind of added in a certain way to sort of help me with that opportunity for a full-time job at the end of it, which happened in Sydney.
Yeah. And I think it was at MI Associates, which is con management consultancy.
Yes, MI is a management consultancy, and they do work in sport specifically as well. So they're also the guys who are behind a lot of the bidding that happens for the Rugby World Cup and a lot of other sports for Australia. They work very closely with a lot of sporting bodies and national sport federations, if you may.
Yeah.
Um, and again, there too, it was a very different experience altogether. It was a lot of primary and secondary data collection. So you had to get into numbers, you had to figure
Yeah.
out the whole mechanism around establishing what a return on investment in, what is an economic impact for an event, which I feel is great and very, very intriguing. I don't think that sort of exists in the country right now, but
Hmm.
in India, I mean.
Yeah.
But just as a concept to be able to justify spends made towards an event will get you a certain return was quite cool.
Right. And after that, did you like continue working in Australia, or did you make your way to India afterwards?
I was
After
in
your stint at MI
Australia.
Associates.
So I was with MI Associates for about 2 years, after which I made my way back to India. And I landed up here. I was very fortunate. I think I was here for about a month or so. And I was fortunate to get a job at Northeast United Football Club, which is an ISL club here in India.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it was quite cool because football is one of my key interests as well, besides rugby, I should say now. But it was getting to do what I really wanted to do. It was really within the like in the heart of things, and you know, the role that I had, which was of what they call the club secretary, is sort of at a managerial kind of level where you look into whether it's sponsorship, whether it's client servicing, whether it's PR, whether it's on ground operations, and this was all during COVID. So that had another
Mm.
layer
Yeah.
of things with health and safety about that as well.
Right.
And as a part of this experience, I landed up in Goa in a bubble for about 6 months.
Oh,
So
really?
that's also been, yeah, it's one of the highlights of that specific role for me.
Wow.
It was mentally quite a bit to take as well,
Of
but all
course.
fun. That experience of having to live with a team for about, I think it was close to 7 months by the time we were done, or 6 months, I should say, um, in a resort every single day, day in, day out. Just go to the training ground and come back. Just go to the stadium for a game and come back. Yeah, it was a very unique experience, I should say.
Wow, 6, 7 months in a bubble, and we imagine players being in that bubble. But most people don't realize that even the staff which is working on the event, they're also part of the bubble. So yeah, it's big. I didn't know like it was that long, 6 or 7 months. Yeah,
Yeah, in fact, uh, uh, unfortunately, what tends to happen is that because you've got your transfer window and you've got people or players coming and going, sometimes the bubbles get breached and there's
yeah,
COVID within your sort of vicinity. And in
hmm,
that case, what would happen is that all of the essentials, which you would say is your technical staff or perhaps your players and your coaches, would still have the freedom to go train and come back and all of that. But somebody who's non-essential, which was my case, uh, who was completely at the managerial side of things, had to pretty much stay in for about a good 16 to 17 days. So that's quite an experience. If I look back
yeah,
now, it's easier to say, but at that point, it was quite something.
yeah. I'm sure, definitely. Right. Yeah. So Akshay, right now you're working at Rugby India as a
Yep.
marketing and communications manager. How did
Yep.
you land up this opportunity? First off, like.
Well, my role at Northeast was sort of broader, and it was a great experience because I got the chance to dip my hands into different aspects, whether it's sort of the agency side of things or the sponsor side of things, and how those things work, the commercial aspects of it, contracts with sponsors, contracts with players, contracts with player agents, so on and so forth. Uh, but whilst I was looking for another opportunity, I was lucky to find Rugby India, who were also sort of, it seemed to be a great fit, and it was for me. And they were looking at someone to sort of come in and fit into this role for a marketing and sort of communications manager. And it's all of the things that I like doing, which included sort of sales to going out and servicing clients, PR, social media, managing your agencies for PR or for digital media as well, social media, so on and so forth. And what's great about it is that we're obviously on a certain pathway in rugby here, where it's still a newer sport for the country. So there's an open ground which sort of allows us to do what we think is best for the sport.
Right.
There's a lot of scope to sort of experiment. There's a lot of scope to see what fits the bill best for us, and then sort of go out with that.
Yeah. Okay. And how has this whole experience been so far, like working at Northeast United and Rugby India? Because they are not, one would say, not mainstream leagues, or of course, ISL is now a mainstream league, definitely. But in terms of like popularity as well, and also the infrastructure, you would say, like, if I compare with cricket, of course, nothing compares to cricket, but in terms of that, how do you see that? Like, how was your experience on the ground?
It's actually a very interesting question, and I'm glad you've asked. Um, for football specifically, what really worked for me was that I have been sort of following the sport for a long time, and Northeast was the hotbed for talent in the country. So there's a lot that goes on in the Northeast, and a lot of our players come from the Northeast. But again, there can be a lot of work that can be done in that region as well. So I feel that the challenges that were there were very different as compared to what you would have maybe expected in a cricket or
Yeah.
even a kabaddi for that matter. No doubt that there
Mhm.
are challenges everywhere, but it's just another scale of it. At the end of the day, it all comes down to the resources that you have available as compared to the resources that you want, and what
Right.
is the best that you can churn out of them. So in both these cases, even with rugby, what's important and what's great is that what we're focusing on is to sort of bridge the gap. It's a little bit of a top to bottom approach and a little bit of a bottom to top approach, where at the base level, you want to be creating a certain amount of following, a certain amount of crowd that likes rugby or knows about rugby to
Yeah.
organically sort of build popularity. But at the same time, we're also hoping to work towards the high performance section so that
Mm.
our team sort of helps us with the medals or the glory that we need to then further publicize this as a part of the country and say that, hey, this is what's happened. As an
Yeah.
example, our women's team it has left for the Asian Games today. So our
Mhm.
women from India are playing rugby. They're seeded seventh and are going to be playing in the Asian Games. It's a huge deal for us, and I can't
Yeah.
harp enough about it. But again, how many people know it? How many
Really,
people are talking
actually.
about it?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it has to be a mix, I guess, of what we're doing at the top of the food chain there in terms of our high performance team, and what we're doing to organically grow the sport at the grassroots level. And that
Right.
includes what's happening at, again, being a national sport federation, what's happening at the state levels, and how are the states pushing out the sport through their district associations, and how are we
Mm.
helping the state and district associations in training and education and training teachers or coaches or physios or managers to sort of do better, and therefore in turn reach out to a larger audience.
Yeah. Right. And since I follow you on LinkedIn, only that way I found out that the women's team is going to the Asian Games. Otherwise, I don't think I would even see it in the newspapers. So yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it is actually a proud moment
Absolutely.
for us that they are seventh seeded. So hopefully they'll go well.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, no doubt. That we're all prepared for. But I think what we're doing, and a lot of credit to the team in general and our high performance team and development team. What tends to happen is that we're trying to give them the most conducive environment that we can to do allow them to perform the best that we can. So it's a little bit of a holistic approach where it's not just about, okay, you come to camp, you
Yeah.
train, and then you go home,
Mm.
but it's also about what can we do when you're not at camp. Of course, you'll have a coach, and we've got a great team of coaches that come from South Africa, and sort of as assistant coaches and head coaches and train our teams. But it's also the other side of things when you're not on the field. So whether it's psychologically having somebody to speak to, like a mental well-being coach, which we have on board at Rugby India, a nutritionist who will
Mm.
literally look into what do you eat when you're not at camp, and how can
Right.
that sort of help you better. Because
Mm.
again, we're trying to look at it at a from a broader lens to say that it's not just about what you will eat when you're in camp for about a month and a half, but it has to be something that has to go around the year. It's that process that I feel a lot of athletes in India are going through for sports not as
Mm.
popular as cricket, where you're trying to sort of make them from sort of part-time athletes to full-time athletes.
Right.
They're
Absolutely.
not doing this for a few months and then,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Next up, what is the sports industry scene like in Mumbai since you're based out of there? What is like, how is the industry in Mumbai and in terms of, I would say, opportunities, talent, and culture?
I would say from a sport federation's perspective, we're one of the only federations that sit out of Bombay. A lot of them are based out of Delhi. So that's
Okay.
one thing that's a little bit of an outlier. But in terms of, I think the private side of things for the sport, Bombay is pretty much the best place to be, because you've got, in terms of, if you look at it from a commercial aspect, in terms of investors or sports, or a lot of the owners of the leagues that happen, whether it's Kabaddi, whether it's cricket, whether
Yeah.
it's ISL, a lot of them are based out of Bombay. And that opens a lot of doors in terms of, at the end of the day, for sports as such as maybe a rugby or other sports that aren't like sort of top tier in terms of awareness,
Hmm.
what you really need is that you need somebody to back you. You need somebody to not potentially only be coming on board as a sponsor for a return on investment, to say that,
Yeah.
all right, I'm putting in X in year one, by year three, I need to see 5X.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's about the narrative, and it's about maybe getting onto the bandwagon early and staying along for the journey. So we've
Right.
got a couple of those sponsors on board already, and they've got that vision where it's not about, all right, what's the churn that we can expect maybe in about a year or so, but it's about, all right, this is growing and this will continue to grow in the next 5 years possibly. And when it does, people will sort of synonymously know the brand with rugby.
Yeah. Right. So, how do you see the Indian sports industry shaping up?
That's a great question. I think what's happening is that the sport ecosystem in India is on an upward trend, and it is really, really growing fairly quickly. And you can see that just with the emergence of so many different leagues that are coming out there.
Hmm.
When
Yeah.
when a sport comes out of the league, you essentially have at least someone backing you in terms of a broadcaster, a sponsor maybe, or a couple maybe, or at least your franchisee owners. So what that essentially tells me is that there are people that are backing sports with money, even apart from cricket. So that's a great sign. And if that's
Actually.
happening, there's
Hmm.
obviously there's obviously a lot of sort of logic and reasoning that will go behind it, in terms of people will know that, all right, there is appetite. The fact that everybody today can literally get onto their phones and consume the content that they want to at any given point in time,
Yeah.
any given sport, lets you know that there's a platform. that if you put out good content out there, good entertainment out there, even when it comes to sport or anything else for that matter, you will see a churn. There will be people who will be interested, and of course, you'll also have to work towards creating that awareness.
Hmm.
But there will be people who will appreciate what you put out there and watch.
Right. And having worked in the industry for a number of years, which three traits should one have, maybe a sports professional should have to succeed in the industry?
That's a very interesting and difficult question, is because a successful person will probably be able to tell you that. I still think I'm on the way somewhere. But if you ask me, one of the main things that I feel have helped me, and in no way am I trying to say that this is gold standard, is the fact that you've got to get your hands dirty. If you
Right.
don't really get in there to understand how things happen operationally, being on field, burning
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
midnight oil at times when it's needed, and not that you should do it just for the experience of it, but
Hmm.
sometimes you just need to. If you don't have that ground up approach in terms of how things actually roll out on ground, it'll be very difficult to sort of sit on top and probably just dictate and say that yes, this is probably the right way to go about it and this is not. So I
Hmm.
feel that sort of how do I say, that determination or that want to be on ground is key. And I think it really drives a lot of my colleagues, a lot of colleagues from our batch as well, who are in this, sort of setting. It really drives them to sort of do what they do, and people like it. I mean, I really like it. I would also it's the right balance that I look for, where I'm also sitting at a desk and doing my job, but at the same time, it
Hmm.
allows me to be on field and allows me to do what I like doing, which is being on the ground, seeing sport,
Yeah.
getting riled up when somebody goes for a try and there's a great tackle. Now that I'm speaking a little bit of rugby lingo and I understand the sport decently, so it's the thrill of it, and I think it has to be there. And if it isn't, I'm sorry, some crackers are going on at the back.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
And yeah, of course, the thrill of the sport is what's like attracts us to it and drives us as well, like even as professionals.
absolutely. I think the fact that you'd like to get down and dirty, be on ground, the fact that you have the heart to sort of, kind of really, it's something that keeps you going. You know,
Yeah.
I would imagine that for if you not got your heart into it, it would be a tad bit difficult for you to keep going on and on, because you probably stop sometime and just question why.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah. Of
your
course.
heart's in the right place and it really drives you that way, I think you never get sick of it. You look at it as another challenge. And even when the going gets tough, sometimes you're just like, ah, yeah, well, I'm going to look back and have enjoyed it anyway. So why not?
Right. And Akshay, lastly, what's ahead for you now? Have you set any short-term and long-term goals for yourself?
So I think in the short term, and of course, it's also a function of what I'm doing at this point in time. I really want to be focusing on what we can do essentially to spread awareness about rugby and let people know about rugby and let people know that we're doing so well when it comes to, again, a few tidbits. Our under 18 team in Asia finished silver last year.
Okay.
Our
Right.
under 20 team in Asia finished silver last year. Our senior women's team in Asia as well, in like the second division, if you would want to call it, finished with the silver. So
Hmm.
our senior women in the Asian circuit, if they finish with a gold this time around, they'll go into the top tier league in the world when it comes to
Wow.
rugby sevens.
Wow.
So
Nice.
it's all great stuff, and there's so much to appreciate. But what's the best way in which we can introduce this to a larger crowd in the country? It's not only going to be about, oh look, we're doing so well, but it's also about how much you know about the sport. What can you know more about the sport, and what's the best way for us to tell you?
Yeah.
It has to
Indeed.
be engaging. It can't be an overload of information or rules and that sort of stuff. So I
Hmm.
think we're in pursuit to find that right balance, and it's a great place to be in as a challenge. It's
Yeah.
it's a great spot to be in, to be able to put your mind to it and try to figure what's probably the best way to get what you need from this.
All right. Yeah. So Akshay, thanks for coming on the show, and it was wonderful chatting with you about Deakin, about the course, and about especially about Northeast United Football and Rugby India, of course. So thanks for coming on the show, and I wish you all the best for your future.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me, and it was a pleasure chatting about things. And yeah, I mean, hopefully we can catch up in person as well. And whenever you're in
Hopefully,
town,
yeah.
please do let me know.
Definitely, I will.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so
All
much
right.
for having me.
No worries, Akshay.